Now, here is, as we mentioned, Director of Athletics at Hofstra University, Rick Cole Jr., ready to talk to us a little bit about fall sports and the foreseeable future of Hofstra Pride Athletics. And Director Cole, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing okay, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. We hear you loud and clear, Rick. So let's start getting into it here. Friday, you made the announcement that all Hofstra Pride fall sports will be suspended for the 2020 season. Take us through your decision.
Well, I think it was a long process, right? Unfortunately, since the pandemic hit, we had been in preparation. I mean, if we could just slow down and go back to March, we just come off the heels of winning that championship. We had one of our runners out at the national championship wrestling, getting ready to go to the national championship meet. And then all of a sudden, everything came to a screeching halt. And as the semester came to an end, and as we went into the summer, we were preparing, working incredibly hard about how do we get back? What is it going to look like? What are some of the modifications that need to get done? And it seemed optimistic, or certainly more optimistic than the last few weeks. And during that time, we started planning for multiple strategies in regard to our return and how we would do that safely and how we would best put our student athletes in a position to succeed. Remember, they hadn't been in any form of organized training since last March, and that's very different for our fall sports and our student athletes. And over the last couple of weeks, when folks were getting back to campus and the numbers started, there were a lot of, not on our campus, but some of the football programs are doing voluntary workouts, and all of a sudden the positive tests started to escalate. Our league, and as you guys know, leagues around the country were quickly and very diligently and in detail having conversations about what modifications were needed. Would we be able to come back in a safe and productive environment for our student athletes, coaches, and staff, and possibly spectators? So, a lot went into that. I mean, when I say a lot went into it, I mean hours upon hours of discussion, working with our friends at Northwell, working with our league, the CAA, even different institutions in the New York metropolitan area. We spent a lot of time discussing what are our options and how do we best do this in a safe way. And everything we did was with the mindset of what is the best thing for our student athletes. And at the end of the day, whatever that answer was, that was the response we came up with. So kind of a long answer, but it's been a long process, right? It's been since last March, and then so much has gone on since then. But it's been a little interesting the last few weeks.
Now, you talked about how the safety of the players, the safety of the coaches, the safety of even possible spectators really seem to be a big driving factor in this decision on your part, at least for Hofstra Athletics. But what was really the biggest domino that had to fall before you really decided to come to this decision about fall sports suspension?
Well, I think what happened was as time continued to move forward, right, and our window was shortening from the time that they had to return to campus for quarantine and for preseason, we had to start to make some real decisions and discussions. What happened was, at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself the question, what is best? And you have to trust the experts. You have to trust what was happening on other campuses. And we knew that it appeared that we need more time. And that's what drove our decision, is we need more time to ensure that we have an environment that is exactly what we want it to be for our student athletes upon their return. So, and when you look at this, so many conferences and institutions are now conferences have either modified and gone to a conference-only schedule for now, or they have postponed. And I think that's really the conversation. It's not about canceling. It's about pressing pause and looking through a different lens of maybe and / hopefully our intention is to pick up the fall, move it to the spring, and drop it for 1 year. Obviously, these are very unique times, which really forces us to need to be agile, flexible, and strategic. So all those that made the decision felt that student athlete welfare was in fact the driving force, and that we would have to be creative to continue to have our fall sports have a competition in this academic year.
So now, Director Cole, I mean, you just mentioned, possibly pushing fall sports off into the spring. How doable is that for Hofstra? And also, what is really the percentage that that could be a possibility?
I'm just of the mindset it is 100% doable. Anything's possible. I think if we are hoping that it would be exactly like it was last year, I think we've all learned in the athletic world and non-athletic world that it's not exactly going to be like last year. So instead of wasting, time and energy about that frustration, because it certainly is frustrating for all of us, and certainly most importantly, our student athletes. So I think it's an absolute possibility, and I think that there will be conversations at the national level where we talk about how does that look like, what does that look like. Certainly, some institutions will have some challenges with facilities, but I've worked in institutions that don't have the number or the quality, maybe facilities that Hofstra has, but you figure it out. And everything is possible if you can just be a little bit creative and try to look through a different lens and have a focus of being solution based, right? Instead of wasting our energy on the fact that it may be a bit difficult. This isn't easy for anybody. This decision was painful, and you don't want to make this decision, but it became an easier decision when you knew in your heart of hearts that it was the right one. And any risk to our student athletes is just not worth taking until we can figure this out a little bit. And I'm optimistic about the spring. Now, I don't control the virus. We don't know exactly what will transpire over the next 2, 3, 4 months. But I do believe that time can be our friend, and then hopefully we'll be able to be more mindful about those decisions. And we'll continue to work on with our medical partners and the NCAA and our CAA counterparts and our institution and local governments to figure out how do we do that quickly. Because while we're not going to have competition, our intent is to reverse and say the championship season will be in the spring, but the fall will be a secondary season where we need time to get these athletes back, strength and conditioning programs, individual skill, which will hopefully progress to large group and team training.
Now, you mentioned earlier, okay, yeah, you can't control the virus necessarily, but I mean, how much of this decision also played into a little bit of, well, you don't know how it's going to go in the future, and maybe you're scared that they'll come into contact, some of these athletes, with students from these travel ban states here in New York that Governor Cuomo isn't allowing to come back in without quarantine and whatnot. I mean, how much did that really play into it for you?
That doesn't play all that much role because there's a 14-day quarantine, right? And whether it's international or select states, and our institution, whether you're a student athlete or not, are going to have to follow those guidelines, and as well we should. It's about, and athletics teaches us, it's a humbling piece that, hey, this team is about something greater than oneself. Well, and we feel the same way about our athletics program in the institution. That in fact that we are a spoke in the wheel of this great institution, and we have to follow the same guidelines that every other community member needs to follow when it comes to this virus and whatever protocols are in place. And just like there'll be protocols, whether it's whatever community you're in athletics, if somebody tests positive or is around somebody that tests positive, there's going to be protocols to follow, and we're not going to negotiate with them. They are what they are, and we're going to do the right thing because that's what we try to do every chance we get.
Now, that's something I do want to ask you about in terms of testing protocol. First of all, what is the protocol for Hofstra Athletics? Is it similar or maybe in line, even parallel with what Hofstra University is doing as a whole, or is it a little bit different? And have any student athletes tested positive by any chance?
So, we don't really, the student athletes aren't on campus. We haven't tested them yet. So there may be, just like any other student. And, we don't share that information if they were to come back and test positive, other than following Nassau County and protocols about tracing and that kind of stuff, for obvious, confidentiality. So as far as protocols go, the NCAA just came out late last week with an updated version of recommendation and protocols. And we will continue to work with Northwell Health and our campus to ensure that we have the testing and tracing systems put in place that are recommended to ensure that our teams and the competitors we may ultimately face, whether it's winter sports or just each other on the team, that will follow the protocols that we put in place.
Now, I want to go a little bit more into the way some of your student athletes are feeling, rather. I know you've probably heard from a lot of them throughout this sort of tough time here in the world. But I mean, for those who are coming from overseas, a lot of players from the UK, especially on a team like Hofstra women's soccer or men's soccer, both of them very UK sort of heavy in terms of player presence. What has it been like for them? Have they been back home? Are some of them having to come back from home? What's the sense there, and what's everyone feeling there?
Yeah, I think a lot of our international students, like our domestic kids, went home, and And certainly in March, when the world started to get a little uncertain with this new virus that people didn't know about, and so certainly they went home, and they're going to come back. I think I was not surprised that I think some of our student athletes weren't overly surprised by the announcement. So I do think they love Hofstra, and I think they're looking forward to returning. I think, look, I have 3 college-age children, and they all play or going to play, college athletics. And we had a unique opportunity to be at home with our family for a long period of time. They're excited to get back to their respective campuses, just like I think a lot of our students are. Will there be uncertainty? I'm sure there will be. But what we have to be sure of is that we try to listen to them, talk to them, communicate, make sure we're addressing the issues that may be of concern. And we'll continue to work with them, not just when they're on their way back, when they get back, but of course after they return, because there's a lot of new things going on, and we're going to have to make sure we're responsive. But I do believe, for the most part, our students want to come back. And if there's uneasiness, that's to be expected.
So now you go from fall sports now into winter sports. And of course, tonight's episode of The Locker Room is focusing on the Hofstra Pride wrestling team, one of a trio of major winter sports here at Hofstra University. What is the outlook for winter sports here at Hofstra?
Outlook in what regard? How will they be this year?
In terms of just being able to start on time, being able to play at normal a lot of time, will there be pushback possibly or delays?
I think it's a great question. I think it's a question we're going to get often, right? And I think that you're going to find not only on our campus but around the country that we'll transition from the fall discussion to the winter discussion. But there is no discussion right now. It's too early for that. We've got time for that. Again, it's mid-July. We could have 2 months before we have serious conversation about the winter sports, and a lot can change in 2 months. I don't know what that means, obviously, because it's just such an unknown. But 2 months is very different. 2 months ago, the country was trending in a very good direction, where the number of cases were decreasing, and I think we were in a better spot. So I think we have not plenty of, I wouldn't say plenty of time, but there is time, and it's premature to have those conversations. But we're going to get this question all the time.
Has there been any consideration coming from the Colonial Athletic Association yet about possibilities of pushing back? Because I know Joe Mihalik was on The Locker Room just last week, in fact, saying he'd be more than willing to start the season in January and have a little bit of May Madness instead of March Madness in the future. Has that been talked around CAA circles?
I don't think it's a talk around circles, but I think that whole sentiment is, hey, let's figure it out, right? Let's come up with some solutions. Let's find a way to get these games in. Again, it comes back to the mindset of, if we're only going to find it successful if we play like we did 2 years ago, we're going to all be pretty frustrated because we're already at a point this fall, and what this winter could be, we're not sure. So we just have to keep asking ourselves the question, how do we help? How do we get creative? How do we get strategic? And let's be flexible to know that it may not be exactly the way we all want it to be, but if it's safe and productive and different, that's okay. And then hopefully, as I knock wood at the table I'm sitting at, hopefully in the future, maybe we do go back to the structure and timeline that we're all accustomed to. But I don't think that's going to be the case this year. Winter certainly is to be determined, but I think Coach Mihalik and every coach and player in America just wants the season to actually happen.
All right. Well, gotcha. Thank you very much, Director Cole, for taking a little bit of time with us here tonight on The Locker Room here on the WRHU Sports Facebook page. Again, for filling us in on the fall sports suspension and what we can expect in the future of Hofstra Pride Athletics. Thank you for your time here tonight, and you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Andrew and Will, thanks so much. Appreciate all you guys do. I hope you and your families are safe, right? Do great stuff tonight, and we'll see you guys hopefully shortly in person, okay?
All right, great. We can't wait.
All right, good night, guys.